21st series of the event. We are sometimes hesitant to call Stoic a concrete or poetic way of life, as if the name of a doctrine were too bookish or abstract to designate the most personal relation with a wound. But where do doctrines come from, if not from wounds and vital aphorisms, which, with their charge of exemplary provocation, are so many speculative anecdotes? Gilles Bousquet must be called Stoic. He apprehends the wounds that he bears deep within his body in its eternal truth as a pure event. To the extent that events are actualized in us, they wait for us and invite us in. They signal us, my wound existed before me, I was born to embody it. It is a question of attaining this will that the event creates in us, of becoming the quasi-cause of what is produced within us, the operator, of producing surfaces and linings in which the event is reflected, finds itself again as incorporeal, and manifests in us the neutral splendor which it possesses in itself, in its impersonal and pre-individual nature, beyond the great and the particular, the collective and the private. It is a question of becoming a citizen of the world. Everything was in order with the events of my life before I made them mine. To live them is to find myself tempted to become their equal, as if they had to get from me only that which they have that is best and most perfect. Either ethics makes no sense at all, or this is what it means, and has nothing else to say, not to be unworthy of what happens to us. To grasp whatever happens as unjust and unwarranted, it is always someone else's fault, is, on the contrary, what renders our sores repugnant. Veritable ressentiment, resentment of the event. There is no other ill will. What is really immoral is the use of moral notions like just or unjust, merit or fault. What does it mean, then, to will the event? Is it to accept war, wounds, and death when they occur? It is highly probable that resignation is only one more figure of ressentiment, since ressentiment has many figures. If willing the event is primarily to release its eternal truth, like the fire on which it is fed, this will would reach the point at which war is waged against war. The wound would be the living trace and the scar of all wounds, and death turned on itself would be willed against all deaths. We are faced with a volitional intuition and a transmutation. To my inclination for death, said Bousquet, which was a failure of the will, I will substitute a longing for death, which would be the apotheosis of the will. From this inclination to the longing there is, in a certain respect, no change except a change of the will, a sort of leaping in place, saut sur place, of the whole body, which exchanges its organic will for a spiritual will. It wills now not exactly what occurs, but something in that which occurs, something yet to come, which would be consistent with what occurs, in accordance with the laws of an obscure, humorous conformity, the event. It is in this sense that the amor fati is one with the struggle of free men. My misfortune is present in all events, but also a splendor and brightness which dry up misfortune and which bring about that the event, once willed, is actualized on its most contracted point, on the cutting edge of an operation. All this is the effect of the static genesis and of the immaculate conception. The splendor and the magnificence of the event is sense. The event is not what occurs, an accident. It is rather inside what occurs, the purely expressed. It signals and awaits us. In accordance with the three preceding determinations, it is what must be understood, willed, and represented in that which occurs. Bousquet goes on to say, become the man of your misfortunes. Learn to embody their perfection and brilliance. Nothing more can be said, and no more has ever been said. To become worthy of what happens to us, and thus to will and release the event, to become the offspring of one's own events, and thereby to be reborn, to have one more birth, and to break with one's carnal birth. To become the offspring of one's events, and not of one's actions, for the action is itself produced by the offspring of the event. The actor is not like a god, but rather like an anti-god, contre Dieu. God and actor are opposed in their readings of time. What men grasp as past and future, God lives it in its eternal present. The God is Chronos. The divine present is the circle in its entirety, whereas past and future are dimensions relative to a particular segment of the circle, which leaves the rest outside. The actor's present, on the contrary, is the most narrow, the most contracted, the most instantaneous, and the most punctual. It is the point on a straight line which divides the line endlessly, and is itself divided into past future. The actor belongs to the aion. Instead of the most profound, the most fully present, the present which spreads out and comprehends the future and the past, an unlimited past-future rises up here, reflected in an empty present, which has no more thickness than the mirror. The actor or actress represents, but what he or she represents is always still in the future and already in the past, whereas his or her representation is impassible and divided, unfolded without being ruptured, neither acting nor being acted upon. It is in this sense that there is an actor's paradox. The actor maintains himself in the instant in order to act out something perpetually anticipated and delayed, hoped for and recalled. The role played is never that of a character. It is a theme, the complex theme or sense, constituted by the components of the event, that is, by the communicating singularities effectively liberated from the limits of individuals and persons. The actor strains his entire personality in a moment which is always further divisible in order to open himself up to the impersonal and pre-individual role. The actor is always acting out other roles when acting one role. The role has the same relation to the actor as the future and past have to the instantaneous present, which corresponds to them on the line of the aeon. The actor thus actualizes the event, but in a way which is entirely different from the actualization of the event in the depth of things. Or rather, the actor redoubles this cosmic or physical actualization in his own way, which is singularly superficial, but because of it more distinct, trenchant, and pure. Thus the actor delimits the original, disengages from it an abstract line, and keeps from the event only its contour and its splendor, becoming thereby the actor of one's own events, a counter-actualization. The physical mixture is exact only at the level of the whole, in the full circle of the divine present. But with respect to each part, there are many injustices and ignominies, many parasitic and cannibalistic processes which inspire our terror at what happens to us, and our resentment at what occurs. Humor is inseparable from a selective force. In that which occurs, an accident, it selects the pure event. In eating, it selects speaking. Bousquet listed the characteristics of the humor actor, de l'humour acteur, to annihilate his or her tracks whenever necessary, to hold up among men and works their being before bitterness, to assign to plagues, tyrannies, and the most frightful wars the comic possibility of having reigned for nothing. In short, to liberate for each thing its immaculate portion, language and will, amor fati. Why is every event a kind of plague, war, wound, or death? Is this simply to say that there are more unfortunate than fortunate events? No, this is not the case, since the question here is about the double structure of every event. With every event there is indeed the present moment of its actualization, the moment in which the event is embodied in a state of affairs, an individual or a person, the moment we designate by saying, "Here, the moment has come." The future and the past of the event are evaluated only with respect to this definitive present, and from the point of view of that which embodies it. But on the other hand, there is the future and the past of the event considered in itself, sidestepping each present, being free of the limitations of a state of affairs, impersonal and pre-individual, neutral, neither general nor particular, eventum tantum. It has no other present than that of the mobile instant which represents it, always divided into past-future, and forming what must be called the counter-actualization. In one case, it is my life. which seems too weak for me and slips away at a point which, in a determined relation to me, has become present. In the other case, it is I who am too weak for life. It is life which overwhelms me, scattering its singularities all about, in no relation to me, nor to a moment determinable as the present, except an impersonal instant which is divided into still future and already past. No one has shown better than Maurice Blanchot that this ambiguity is essentially that of the wound and of death, of the mortal wound. Death has an extreme and definite relation to me and my body, and is grounded in me, but it also has no relation to me at all. It is incorporeal and infinitive, impersonal, grounded only in itself. On one side, there is the part of the event which is realized and accomplished. On the other, there is that part of the event which cannot realize its accomplishment. There are thus two accomplishments, which are like actualization and counter-actualization. It is in this way that death and its wound are not simply events among other events. Every event is like death, double, and impersonal in its double. It is the abyss of the present, the time without present with which I have no relation, toward which I am unable to project myself. For in it I do not die, I forfeit the power of dying. In this abyss, they, on, die. They never cease to die, and they never succeed in dying. How different this they is from that which we encounter in everyday banality. It is the they of impersonal and pre-individual singularities, the they of the pure event wherein it dies in the same way that it reigns. The splendor of the they is the splendor of the event itself or of the fourth person. This is why there are no private or collective events, no more than there are individuals and universals, particularities and generalities. Everything is singular, and thus both collective and private, particular and general, neither individual nor universal. Which war, for example, is not a private affair. Conversely, which wound is not inflicted by war and derived from society as a whole. Which private event does not have all its coordinates, that is, all its impersonal social singularities. There is, nevertheless, a good deal of ignominy in saying that war concerns everybody, for this is not true. It does not concern those who use it, or those who serve it, creatures of ressentiment. And there is as much ignominy in saying that everyone has his or her own war or particular wound, for this is not true of those who scratch at their sores, the creatures of bitterness and ressentiment. It is only true of the free man who grasps the event and does not allow it to be actualized as such without enacting, the actor, its counter-actualization. Only the free man, therefore, can comprehend all violence in a single act of violence, and every mortal event in a single event, which no longer makes room for the accident, and which denounces and removes the power of ressentiment within the individual, as well as the power of oppression within society. Only by spreading ressentiment, the tyrant forms allies, namely slaves and servants. The revolutionary alone is free from the ressentiment by means of which one always participates in and profits by an oppressive order. One and the same event. Mixture which extracts and purifies or measures everything at an instant without mixture, instead of mixing everything together. All forms of violence and oppression gather together in this single event, which denounces all by denouncing one, the nearest or final state of the question. The psychopathology which the poet makes his own is not a sinister little accident of personal destiny, or an individual unfortunate accident. It is not the milkman's truck which has run over him and left him disabled. It is the horsemen of the 100 blacks carrying out their pogroms against their ancestors in the ghettos of Vilna. The blows received to the head did not happen during a street brawl, but when the police charged the demonstrators. If he cries out like a deaf genius, it is because the bombs of Guernica and Hanoi have deafened him. It is at this mobile and precise point, where all events gather together in one, that transmutation happens. This is the point at which death turns against death, where dying is the negation of death, and the impersonality of dying no longer indicates only the moment when I disappear outside of myself, but rather the moment when death loses itself in itself, and also the figure which the most singular life takes on in order to substitute itself for me.